Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well and are enjoying the very first few days of spring. For today's video, I thought I would kick things off and talk a little bit more about spring runway trends. I did a very similar video to this back in the fall and you guys really seemed to like it. So for this time around, I thought I would kind of switch it up a little bit and talk about the trends that I saw on the runway and then also how you can apply it to a more vintage wardrobe. Before I start, I just want to side note that it literally took me so long on the Vogue Runway app to actually find some decent photos because the styling on most of these collections were not nice, like at all. Like I don't really know what was happening. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic that people had less resources or if they were in creative ruts. I don't really understand what was happening, or maybe this is just the direction that we're going in the fashion industry, but it was just not very nice, to be honest. It actually took me a really long time to find some decent images for each trend, so bear with me. I tried to find the best ones to represent each trend. So without further ado, I do have my laptop here in front of me, so I have them all here so that I can keep myself on track and also have the images beside me while I talk about them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so the very first trend is actually the one that I am like the most excited about, and it is full midi skirts. You guys know how much I love a full midi skirt. It's something that I always look for whenever I go shopping. I know Siriano had like this matching set with this massive skirt that looked beautiful. Prada actually had 3 looks that had full midi skirts. Stella Jean, Self-Portrait, and just so many others that I'm gonna be popping up on the screen right now so you guys can see them. But it was just kind of all over the runway in different collections. Like I said, this is my favorite trend of the season and it's something that I'm going to be shopping for the spring, but that's going to be for a separate video. I'm actually going to be talking about that I think in my next video or the one after that, so make sure you guys tune in for that. The last time these types of skirts were popular was back in the 1950s after Dior released its new look in 1947. This abundance of fabric came after the end of World War II where fabric was rationed. So of course after the war people just kind of wanted change and they did have extra fabric, so they embraced this new look. On the runway I saw the skirts being paired with more modern accessories like running shoes, t-shirts, that sort of thing. But I will probably be wearing it in a more traditional 1950s, early 1960s style with a kitten heel, a delicate blouse, maybe a cardigan, and a sweater clip. The next trend that I saw on the runway was stripes. You saw really large ones through Miu Miu, 3 as in 4, Keaton, Kenneth E's, Ralph Lauren, which of course they're going to have stripes. I feel like their whole brand is stripes, as well as many others that I'm going to be popping up on the screen. I feel like stripes have been in and out of style throughout history. They kind of pop up in every single decade, from their first appearance in medieval times, although back then it was mostly clowns and prisoners that donned the black and white stripes. By the end of the 19th century, that had all changed. Queen Victoria actually dressed her son in a striped sailor outfit for a yacht event, so by this point stripes were more associated with sailors and marine life. And that is why some of the first bathing suits were blue and white stripes. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of stripes. I feel like that cream sweater with the blue stripes is very girl that goes to Target and watches The Bachelor, which is not my style at all. Nothing wrong with that, it's just not something that I would particularly wear. So I'll probably try to wear this trend in a more 1950s style, so in dresses and skirts and in a more subtle, thinner stripe. As far as colors go, I'll probably stick to more pastel tones and avoid the black and white stripes. I just think it's a little bit more feminine and less Beetlejuice, if that makes sense. Next trend that I saw were loud, organic, colorful prints. I actually saw a lot of organic prints, and what I mean by organic is very like free-flowing, so think flowers, swirls, groovy 1960s type patterns, and tons of bright colors. From the iconic Emilia Bucci, Alessandro Rich, Andrew Jin, LA Double J, for Restless Sleepers, as well as many others that I'm going to be popping up on the screen so you guys can see them right now. I think since this trend is not very specific in the type of print, I feel like you have a little bit more playing room in what prints that you can wear. As long as it's bright, loud, and organic, I think you're pretty much good. So you probably have something in your closet already that works really well for this print. So it makes it really accessible to most people. I think people just kind of want to have a little bit more color after the pandemic. Not that the pandemic is over, but I feel like since so many countries are getting vaccinated, a lot of people are kind of starting to see a faint light at the end of the tunnel, so people just kind of want to come out of their house in really bright colors. Usually when a country goes through really difficult times, the colors of the clothes tend to be really muted. It's just kind of like a pattern, and then when things kind of get better, bright colors emerge. I don't know, this is kind of like my analysis of what's happening because I feel like fashion does reflect a lot of what's happening in society. Anyway, so the way that I would wear this print is in more groovy, psychedelic little dresses and tops. Think late 1960s, early 1970s, Twiggy, Carnaby Street, that kind of style. I feel like there's never shortage of these types of pieces because in the 1960s, more people were shopping in actual stores versus having their clothes made by themselves or a family member, which was more typical in previous decades. People also started owning more clothes, and then in the stores, they would have different sizes. So this led to there being more left over for a new generation. So for us, so if you go to a vintage store, there's always going to be way more 1960s, 1970s pieces than there is 1950s, 1940s, and below. If you are looking for something from the 1960s, definitely hit up the vintage stores. You will find something, I promise you. And it also tends to be a little bit cheaper as well because there is so much of it. The next trend that I saw, I'm going to label as Dolly. I don't really have another way to describe this, so I'm labeling it as Dolly, as in doll, because I'm classifying this as something that a doll would wear. It's very feminine. There's tons of ruffles and frills, lace, very feminine and frilly. I don't know, to be honest, I'm just labeling things and pulling things out of nowhere because I have no idea what this style is actually called. So let's just kind of roll with it. I'll show you some photos so you guys can understand kind of like my thought process. You saw this on the runway through C, Zimmerman. Giambattista Valli actually had tons of examples of this look. I think it's because of the hair bow that they had in all the models that just kind of pushed the doll narrative for me, but it just worked really well. This is actually one of my favorite collections in the entire season. I think the looks were just really beautiful, and the hair bow just kind of tied it all together. I love the styling in the entire collection. Tommy Hilfiger had a really frilly pink look. Ashley Williams had some ruffly kind of features as well. Paul and Joe had tons of really frilly little short dresses, as well as many others that I'm going to be showing you on the screen right now. I think this trend is actually really cute. You guys know I love my ruffles, I love my bows, I love anything kind of feminine and frilly, so I hope more people wear this and it's more accessible to everybody because I think it's really cute. For myself, I was kind of thinking of where these designers are pulling inspiration from for these types of looks, and I think I narrowed it down to Edwardian children, which sounds really random, but just kind of go with it. I think this is kind of where I would pull inspiration from if I am going to be wearing this particular style. Think ruffles, large bows, white dresses, and a really great way to incorporate this type of style if you don't want to go full out is just to add a big bow in your hair. I think it just kind of makes a simple dress look a little bit more doll-like, if that makes sense. Alternatively, if you want something a little bit more modern, you could go for the 1960s for inspiration. In the mid to later part of the decade, there were tons of baby doll type dresses that had like a Peter Pan collar or like those big bib collars, similar to kind of what my shirt has right now. You can also add some white tights or get some lace dresses that I think would work really, really well. Okay, I have one more trend and then some honorable mentions, like one-offs that I saw. So the last trend that I have is large collars, and we all know these large ruffly collars have been trending for almost a year now. You see them everywhere, and I still think we're going to be seeing them through the spring and the summer. Alessandra Rich had the classic ruffle collar that we've been seeing everywhere. Andrew Jin had some more lacy ones, which I actually thought was a really nice detail. Pato had these really big collars that almost reached the shoulder, which I actually thought were really, really great. So this is kind of where I started seeing a shift from the regular collar to a more capelet type collar. I'm going to be putting some examples up on the screen right now so you guys can see what I mean, but I actually think it looks really, really nice, and I haven't seen stuff like this in a while, which I actually think is really pretty. I think my favorite one was from Lanvin, I never know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, but they had this beautiful look that was very reminiscent of the 1920s, and it is just absolutely beautiful. I love the entire styling and the entire dress and the little capelet collar. It was just beautiful, so I love that one. I thought that was really, really great. I personally love an oversized collar. I actually think it looks really cute. However, it can very quickly go into like 1980s territory, which I'm not a fan of at all. So you kind of have to be careful of what prints you pair it with because it can look very 1980s. So I would stay away from anything that has that kind of grandma couch kind of print because that's going to make it scream 80s if that's not really something that you're looking for. I would personally go for more neutral tones, and if you are going to go for something with a print, make sure it's something more subtle or that it's more reminiscent of a different decade, just to kind of like stray it away from the 1980s. That's just kind of like a personal preference though. So for example, the way that I would wear it is to wear something more like 1950s. So if I have a more 1950s like polka dot dress and have the big white collar, I think that would work really well. Or you could go for a more 1960s shift dress and have a really big collar. It wouldn't have as many ruffles, but I still think that it works really well. You could have some plaid or like a plain color, and it's going to look very 1960s versus 1980s, which I actually think is what I would wear if I was going to wear this trend. But to be honest, I'm not really sure how much of this trend I'm actually going to wear because I was really into like the really round ruffly collar, and then it got really trendy and it was everywhere, so I kind of want to break from it because I keep seeing it so often. And I'm personally a little bit more interested in a more sailor type collar right now, and that's what I'm going to be shopping for. But I'm not going to get too much into that right now because I am going to be doing a separate video on what I'm shopping shopping for the spring and summer, so make sure you guys tune in for that. Okay, to finish off this video, I just wanted to mention some random things that I saw that are not trends. They're like one-offs that I saw on the runway that I really liked, so I just wanted to mention them. I saw a few pillbox hats, which made me so happy. I love pillbox hats. I think they're so cute, and I'm kind of on a hat kick right now. I kind of want to make it like my mission in the spring and summer to wear a hat every single time that I go outside. I don't know. I really want to like wear all of my hats. So it really caught my attention just because I am constantly thinking about hats. And then another one that I saw was like the short skirt combo. You saw this a lot in the 1950s and the early 1960s, and I just think it's so cute and you never see it. But Stella Jean actually made one. They have like the shorts with the skirt, and it's so reminiscent of the 1950s, perfect for like the beach or something where you're going to be active but you also want to wear a skirt. I think it's so cute, and I hope we see more of this because I actually think it's a really great trend, and I genuinely think people would buy it if it was available in stores, but no one really seems to be making them. So I'm glad to see at least somebody is trying to make something similar. So I was really happy to see that on the runway. And then the last one that I have, I almost included it as a trend, but I don't think there's enough of it on the runways for me to actually classify it as a trend. But there was a lot of fluff on the runways and a little bit of faux fur, but mostly like ostrich feather type fluff. So it's really fluffy. I saw it a lot on the collar, on the cuffs, on the hemlines, and I think this is a trend that's a little bit less wearable on like an everyday basis. However, if you do want to wear it in a more casual setting, I would pull inspiration from the 1960s. I think there's this white coat that Mia Farrow wears that is actually really cute, and it has a little bit of like faux fur at the bottom, as well as Marianne Faithfull has probably worn something like this, like ostrich feather type scarf or collar situation. I think she would have worn something like that. So I'm sure there's tons of inspiration you can pull from the 1960s for that particular type of look. Alternatively, if you want something a little bit more elegant, I would look to the 1920s, because the 1920s is like the ultimate place to pull inspiration for elegant fashion. Honestly, every time I see photos like this, I just wish that everybody wore clothes like this because they're just so beautiful, and it makes me want to live in the 1920s. Speaking of the 1920s, there were these dresses by Lanvin that reminded me of this photo from the 1920s, although the one from the 1920s is much nicer, like no offense, but it's just so beautiful that it has that kind of style. So I guess Lanvin was kind of having a more 1920s kind of style. You can definitely see it in the hair and the models that they used. Giambattista Valli also had a lot of fluff on their runway as well, but it was mostly like tulle as opposed to ostrich feather, so it was a little bit more like fluffy, sheer kind of fabric. I wouldn't necessarily wear tulle the way that they did on the runway, but this is the perfect opportunity to wear the 1950s tulle dresses that I have because it has a very similar style. It's just the tulle is on the bottom part of the outfit as opposed to like near the collar. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you guys liked it. Let me know in the comments below if you like these types of videos or if you want to see more of these types of videos. If you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe, and if you are, make sure to turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss out on any new videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!